2, 1. Hey, everybody. Dr. Darin Ingels here, and thank you for joining us this morning. I'm so excited to have you join us with Dr. Terry Wahls. I feel very fortunate that I've gotten to know Dr. Wahls over the last couple of years. We actually met through the Mindshare community, which is a group of health entrepreneurs. And it's just so interesting that as I've learned more about her and her work, it's become very near and dear to my heart. Many of you know, I was diagnosed with Lyme disease back in 2002, and I overcame that and was years of being symptom-free. And then I developed multiple sclerosis myself about 3 years ago. So I've learned so much from Dr. Wahls about her work. I've incorporated in my own life. Have found it's made a huge difference. So Dr. Wahls, thank you so much for joining me today, and I'm excited to talk to you and hear about some of the new cool things you're doing in your work. So thank you for joining us.
Oh, thanks for having me, Daryl.
Yeah. So I want to start off. I know you've told this 1,000 times, but for people who really aren't familiar with you and your work yet, can you just share a little bit about your story? Because it really is pretty amazing.
So I'm a conventional internal medicine physician here at the University of Iowa, and was very skeptical of special diets, supplements, complementary alternative medicine. But God has a mysterious way of teaching us. You see, in 2000, I developed some weakness in my left leg and was evaluated eventually by a neurologist and diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. Now, I knew I wanted to treat my disease aggressively, so I did some research, found the best people in the country, took the newest drugs, but I continued to relentlessly worsen. 2 years into this, my physicians told me about the work of Lauren Cordain. And so I read his papers, his books, and after 20 years of being a low-fat vegetarian, I went back to eating meat. I gave up all grain, all legumes, all dairy, but continued to decline. Then the next year, I'm in a tilt recline wheelchair. I'm taking the new biologic drugs. I continue to relentlessly decline. I also have electrical face pain due to trigeminal neuralgia, and that is continuing to steadily worsen. By 2007, I am so weak I cannot sit up in a regular chair as I am now. I'm beginning to have brain fog. My trigeminal neuralgia is much more intense, far, far more difficult. And so it's really very clear that the best conventional drugs from the best people taking the newest drugs is not stopping my slide into a bedridden, potentially demented, potentially intractable pain life.
Yeah. Wow.
Now, fortunately, when I hit the wheelchair, I decided that I wanted to do everything that I possibly could. So I went back to reading the basic science. I was reading, searching PubMed, and I started with the theory that mitochondrial dysfunction was the driver of neurodegeneration and the driver of disability. So I started creating a supplement cocktail for my mitochondria, which helped my fatigue ever so slightly. And I thought it was slowing the rate of my decline. In the summer of 2007, I discovered the Institute for Functional Medicine. I took their course on neuroprotection. I had a longer list of supplements. I was very excited to be reviewing my biochemistry and physiology. And then I had this really big aha moment. Like, what if I redesign my paleo diet in a very specific way based on what I learned from the basic science and this list of supplements? And so again, that's more research, but I get this reorganized and I start this new way of eating, still paleo, but now a very structured paleo. And I start on December 26th. Now, in 3 months, my pain is gone. My brain fog is gone. The severe fatigue is gone. And my physical therapist is saying, Terry, you're getting stronger. And he begins advancing my exercises. Then he has me start lifting weights. And I began walking again. And at 6 months into this, I decided I want to ride my bike again. I haven't done that in 6 years. We had this emergency family meeting. My wife says, my son's going to run on the left side. My daughter will run on the right side. She'll follow on her bike. And in fact, I'm able to bike around the block. My son is crying, my daughter's crying, my wife's crying, I'm crying. And if I talk about it much longer, I'll start crying now because that felt so miraculous. because I had accepted that with progressive MS, there is no recovery, that functions once lost are gone forever. But I just ridden my bike, and it was very clear that the conventional understanding of progressive multiple sclerosis is incomplete, and that who knew how much recovery might be possible. And in fact, in another 6 months, Jackie finds a ride called the Courage Ride that's 18.5 miles. And we decided to sign up. And in fact, I'm able to do the 18.5 mile ride with my family. And once again, my son's crying, my daughter's crying, my wife's crying, and I'm crying. And this, of course, radically changes how I'm thinking about disease and health. It would radically change how I practice medicine. And it would ultimately change the type of research that I do.
So, what's so amazing about that is in a year, you went from being in a tilt recline wheelchair to riding a bike.
At 18.5 mile ride. So, it's not just like around the block. I just 18.5 miles. Now, I was tired at the end, but I mean, how heroic. I had completely accepted that, recovery of function would not be possible, that I would never again be an athlete, that, I had accepted that I was never going to be able to sit up at the table to eat again.
Yeah.
But, obviously that changed.
Well, it's interesting. When I met with my neurologist, and I'm sure you had a similar experience along the way, they paint a pretty bleak picture. And, they're preparing you for the worst, preparing you for your wheelchair, preparing you for when you're immobile, and really offering very little hope. So what I love about your story and your work is, you're showing that, MS can be slowed, I think can be reversed.
Yes.
It is built into our DNA that the body can repair itself and heal. I'm a naturopathic doctor, and one of our tenets of medicine is, the healing power of nature. We've got this capacity as humans to heal. We just need to give the right tools to do that. And I think that's why diet is so critically important, not just with MS, I think with really any kind of chronic illness, right?
Oh, absolutely. One of the tenets that I certainly teach when I'm out talking to the public is life is a series of self-correcting biochemical reactions. And so that's why, we're alive, which means if we give ourselves the building blocks they need to run those biochemical reactions, they will begin to replace misshapen, incorrectly made proteins with correctly made ones. And molecule by molecule, a steadily healthier, more vital you will be rebuilt.
Yeah, well, I just want to emphasize for anyone who's tuning into this, don't underestimate the power of diet. And the thing I love about it is, anybody can do this. This isn't limited by where you live, your socioeconomic status. This is a choice. This is about you choosing to put food in your mouth that's either healing you or harming you. And so, if you read Dr. Wahls' book, she outlines in detail, this kind of diet that you can follow. And again, it's not going to break the piggy bank. It's really just the discipline to commit to your health to start making these changes. But, it's doable. I did it. Look, I'm a doctor too. And I don't know about you. I'm a terrible patient. I think most doctors are. We know too much. It's hard to trust other people with our own health. Sometimes we're our own worst enemies. We get in our way. But I went to your conference last year. I was a speaker, but I got to hear these amazing stories from people who had, MRI showing that their lesions had disappeared. Their mobility was better. Their function was better. Their life was better. All happening within a relatively short period of time. So we know that it takes, potentially a long time to repair neurons, and depending on the extent of disease, that may take longer for some people than other. But, you're a great example of, you can start at any time, even for someone who's already in a wheelchair.
Correct.
The capacity to turn this around and, start making improvements in your health.
I was so weak, I could not sit up, and I was struggling with brain fog. And I'd had 27 years of relentless worsening of trigeminal neuralgia. And these are electrical face pains that will, jolt across either the right side of the face or the left side of my face. And then 7 years of relentless worsening of the MS. And if I can come back to pain-free, to being able to walk and hike and bike and be physically active again, then the message I have for all those folks with MS and other serious autoimmune diseases or even serious mental health issues, if I can come back, there's absolutely hope that you could come back too, that we could stop your decline and let your body begin to repair you molecule by correctly made molecule.
Yeah. No, it's such a powerful message. And again, I'm hoping for anyone who's tuning in, if you have MS or if you know someone with MS, please share this video. Please share Dr. Wahls' book, because again, the information is so incredibly empowering that there's so much you can do on your own. Don't necessarily rely on your neurologist or your other doctor to do it for you. This is something you can do on your own.
Yeah, I think there's a lot more acceptance now. When my book came out in 2014, the first one, there was a tremendous resistance. Take drugs, diet and lifestyle don't really matter. Fortunately, the research has continued to show that diet, in fact, does matter. The higher the quality of the diet, the less disability, the better control of the disease. And now the MS Society and the leading neuroscientists are saying, if you rely just on drugs, your brain will continue to have neurodegeneration. You'll have more rapid brain volume loss, more rapid cognitive decline, and more rapid onset of disability. So even if you're taking drugs, even our conventional neurologists, our leading neuroscientists are saying everyone needs to be following a high-quality diet, a stress-reducing practice, and daily exercise. It's like they finally read my book to realize that this doesn't have to be an either or. You can take drugs and do diet and lifestyle, or you can decide that you're not comfortable with the risk profile of the drugs and you want to do diet and lifestyle first to see, could you get control with just that? And that's really a clinical decision in terms of how ill you are at baseline.
Right.
If you have a serious deficit already, a high lesion load in your brain, it might be appropriate to start disease-modifying drugs and diet and lifestyle right away. Or it might be appropriate to wait on the drugs for 3 months and do diet and lifestyle immediately and see what you get. Here at the University of Iowa, I'm very well known throughout Iowa. So a lot of the folks who are newly diagnosed, they'll come in and say, I'm afraid of the drugs. I want to do diet and lifestyle. In our neurology, again, our conventional neurology physicians will say, okay, that's fine. You have to be all in. If you're going to do the Wahls Protocol, be all in completely. And let's see you in 3 months and see how things are going. And that's an acceptable option. But they're very clear that if you're going to do diet and lifestyle, this should be a complete commitment. You don't want to just be doing it sort of.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, I love that approach. And I know our mutual friend, Dr. Ken Charlin, who's a neurologist in Missouri, who's a functional medicine neurologist, and I believe his expertise is MS. I had that conversation with him as well. It's like, look, it's not an either or. And there are times where, drugs may be very appropriate, but that's not the end game. We're still working on improving your overall health, improving your gut function, improving your immune function. And this may be just a stepping stone to help get you to that space. But I would also say that I have seen people where I think that drugs really are the most appropriate thing at that time. Again, I'm a naturopathic doctor. I'm supposed to tell you that drugs are bad, but there is a moment where they can be really very helpful. And if it's going to help maintain your mobility and your lifestyle while you're getting all these other pieces in place, I wouldn't necessarily, shun it just because it's a drug. Oh
yeah. So we'll take my case. So I've had, 27 years of trigeminal neuralgia, steadily worsening. I was on gabapentin, extraordinary doses of gabapentin, and of course, very potent disease-modifying drugs. I recover my function. I talk to my physicians and ask about going off my disease-modifying drugs, and they wean me off. So beginning, I think, early March 2008, I've been off disease-modifying drugs. We've tried to steadily do, because I'm doing so much better with my pain, we wean away the gabapentin. And I take it down to zero. My face pain comes back. So I go back on the gabapentin. I've tried a couple times trying to get all the way off. Face
Yeah.
pain always comes back. So I'm still on the gabapentin. I'll probably be on it the rest of my life, but it's a tiny, tiny, tiny dose,
Right.
less than a tenth of what I was on previously. And as long as I'm not exposed to gluten or dairy or eggs, my face pain is not a problem. And there's no question, I'm immensely grateful for the gabapentin. The trigeminal neuralgia is a horrific level of pain. And so it makes a huge difference to my quality of life that I can take a little dose of gabapentin every day and be pain-free and use my diet and lifestyle, and I have a great life. So it's not that I'm anti-drug. I want people to be on the lowest dose and the drugs with the least side effects that maintain good control of their disease.
Absolutely.
So for me, tiny dose of gabapentin is all that I need.
That's great. Yeah, and for me, again, my neurologist recommended a biologic medicine. I have declined respectfully, just because, again, I feel like I function pretty well. I do take a little bit of baclofen at bedtime, just because it helps me sleep and it keeps me from getting muscle spasms at night. Again, I take a very low dose, and it does the job. And I'm hoping at some point, as I continue to improve, I'll come off that. But again, I don't get any side effects from it. I've been on it for a while now. So again, it's all about finding the right combination for you of, if you need medication, fine, but understand that, again, that's not going to be the last thing you do. You're still going to be working on improving your health. And I kind of want to talk a little bit too, just about the importance of gut health. This really ties into diet, but I've been reading all this research specific with MS, is that we do see this different, gut ecology in MS patients versus, people who don't have MS, right?
Correct. So again, back in 2014, people were trying to tell me that diet didn't matter, that leaky gut was not a factor, that, and then finally, the research starts coming out that, in fact, there is increased intestinal permeability or leaky gut in people with MS. And then that, yes, there's a different microbiome of people who have MS and people who don't have MS. And of course, that difference is different whether you're in Japan or in Africa or in Europe or in America. What I think, when I have this conversation with my immunology, microbiology PhD guy, who's part of my research team, what we really want to focus on is, what are the metabolic processes that your microbes can do that will make the molecules you need to run the chemistry of life? It's not so much the species that we're selecting for, it's the metabolic steps.
Right.
So, the way to think about this is our ancestral mother, hundreds of generations ago, because of the random mutations that occur, couldn't make compound XYZ anymore. But the microbes in her gut could. So she still had plenty of compound XYZ and therefore had reproductive success. So, and she passed those microbes to her offspring through her vagina. That is how we, as a species, trimmed our DNA from about 100,000 genes down to about 25,000 genes. Those extra genes reside in the microbes. Then it's different microbes according to which region of the world that we originated.
Right.
And that's also why having a really diverse microbiome is helpful. You're more likely to have all those genes that we need to fully thrive. And again, we depend on those genes to run the chemistry of life optimally, to have our optimal health.
Yeah. And so, that's part of my intake when I'm meeting with a new patient, whether it's MS or other type of chronic illness, is really trying to evaluate gut function. Because again, if you're not digesting your food well, you're not absorbing your food, and again, you're not getting that diverse microbiome, you're really kind of setting the stage for having problems down the line. So as much as we can start to work on gut function. So, for me, gut and diet kind of go hand in hand, right? Because the food you put in your mouth affects your microbiome. But if you've got leaky gut, you need to talk about some steps to repair that. So, I know in my book and your book, you talk about different things people can do to help repair leaky gut. It's not terribly complicated, but again, it just takes a little bit of discipline and some time. But again, the gut it repairs itself actually at a fairly fast rate relative to other tissues in the body. So when you started making those steps towards repairing your gut, you can get to a point where you tighten up what we call these gap junctions, right? These are the spaces in between the cells, so that you don't get large proteins that pass through, because large proteins that are particularly partially digested can be very stimulating to the immune system in a negative way, and that just kind of perpetuates this inflammation in the gut.
Absolutely, absolutely. And the science is getting better and better about understanding which microbes are more likely to cause trouble, and then which microbial metabolites are associated with better health.
Yeah.
I'm really, really excited. I have a freezer full of biospecimens from my previous studies. And so I'm writing grants with my colleagues to get these biospecimens analyzed. And it's looking very promising that we'll begin to analyze those specimens. So that will be exciting. And both Ashu and I think that the driver are the microbes that are digesting our food, making these metabolites that show up in our bloodstream, and of course cross over into the blood-brain barrier, and irritate the heck out of our brain, or calm our brain, depending on the choices.
Yeah, I've been really fascinated by the research I've read about, what goes on in the gut. We call the gut, the second brain. There's a lot of nerve endings in the gut, actually more than the brain. But what happens in the gut has a direct communication to the brain. So it's not necessarily that you have to absorb something through the gut, let it, get absorbed through the bloodstream and then cross the blood-brain barrier. There's that direct connection through the vagus nerve that can stimulate chemical interactions in the brain. So a lot of these neurological, psychiatric, mental, emotional things people are experiencing sometimes is really just that direct connection from the gut. So again, healing the gut, again, is just critically important to really sustaining good health.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
So Dr. Wahls, can you just talk us through a little bit about the diet? Because you talk about it really kind of going in different stages so that people can kind of ease into it. So you want to give us kind of a quick synopsis of how that looks?
So, and this is the diet that I've used in my clinical trials and in my therapeutic lifestyle clinic at the VA, where I'd like to have people ideally at least go gluten-free, dairy-free, egg-free, because these are the three foods that are most inflammatory. And then I ramp up the vegetables, particularly green leafy vegetables, then sulfur-rich vegetables in the cabbage, onion, mushroom family, and then deeply pigmented vegetables and berries, things like beets, carrots, berries. And then we have a protein source. And while I prefer that people eat meat, I do have a guidance for vegetarian and vegans, because I recognize that some people choose to not eat meat for very important spiritual beliefs that we're going to go ahead and honor.
Right.
Then the next level up is now I introduce organ meat and convince people why you want to have liver once a week, why heart, clams, mussels, oysters are really good for you. And by the way, we're having clams tonight. So these are really superfoods for you. And we talk about...
You do live in Iowa though, right?
Yeah, I know. Although, there are bivalves in Iowa. You can get them out of various ponds. And so at our ponds, we could get mussels as well. But these are frozen ones. So the organ meats, then we have seaweed, and I like to have people learn how to make fermented foods. So we have kimchi, sauerkraut, and then soaking and germinating your nuts and seeds. And then the next level would be there's a ketogenic version of my diet for those who would benefit from ketosis. We have an elimination diet that's a little bit more restrictive for people who have perhaps more involvement involving their joints, such as rheumatoid arthritis, psoriatic arthritis. And then actually, we've now also acknowledged that some people are not yet ready to begin now going gluten-free, dairy-free. And so in my lifestyle clinic, I'd send them to the dietitian to work on implementing the Mediterranean diet. You can sort of think of that as a pre-Wahls diet. They're ramping up the vegetables, switching to whole grains. And Then when they're ready, they go gluten-free, dairy-free, and that's really Wahls level 1.
Great. Yeah. And just a couple of other little pointers. I oscillate between level 2, level 3, kind of depending. I have a really hard time with organ meats. Honestly, I don't like them. But you introduced me to Paleo Valley, which makes nice capsules of organ meats. So I get my capsules of organ meats that way. So I still get the health benefits.
That works out. Yeah.
And I just can't choke down liver. And it's funny, my fiance is Vietnamese, and actually in a lot of the dishes, there's heart and kidney and liver and other things. So if I get some of those dishes, it's kind of hidden and I don't notice it as much. But I find that the Paleo Valley capsules actually work pretty well. So that's very well for people who just have a hard time for whatever reason stomaching organ meats. But again, you get all those health benefits. And
in the organ meat capsules, I've trained my dog. I have a bottle. I shake them and he comes running. He's like, oh my God, he's so thrilled. I let him have a capsule or two.
Yeah. And the other thing I'll add to the diet, in addition to that, one of the things I like to do in my practice too is help people identify if they've got any kind of food allergies, food sensitivities, because that just adds a different level of complexity to the whole thing. Again, if there's something that's irritating your immune system, it can cause gastrointestinal problems, it can cause neurological problems, skin issues. So if you're working with a practitioner who has the capacity to evaluate that, there's a lot of different ways, and I won't really go into it now, but definitely talk to your healthcare provider and see if there's a way you can find out what's actually bothering your immune system so that you can get those out of your diet and make sure they're not furthering any kind of inflammatory process.
Absolutely. That can be really helpful. Yeah. In my book, I give people guidance as to how to start and work just with your primary care doc. And for many, that will be guidance enough. You'll do very well. But yes, there are times where doing some more advanced functional medicine testing lets you personalize the protocol much more specifically to your unique issues.
Yeah, well, that's the beauty of all this, right? It really is about personalized medicine. We just got to find the right set of things that work for each person, and everyone's a little bit different. So in my practice, it's always, the fine tuning of what we're doing to make sure we're giving really the optimal results. So.
Absolutely.
And can we talk a little bit about lifestyle? Again, I think, the diet is hugely important, but lifestyle is one of those things that I think most healthcare providers, I don't think most doctors are really talking to their patients about diet anyway. But beyond that, I don't think lifestyle really gets spoken about hardly at all.
Yeah, this is really all about self-care. I am steadily myself doing a better and better job of self-care for myself. Absolutely, diet, you want to get the diet correct, but how we live and thrive is really dependent on, am I taking care of my sleep? Am I getting sunlight into my eyes during the day so that I can sleep better at night? Am I engaging a lot of self-talk that is saying terrible things like, Terry, you're incompetent, you don't know what you're doing, you're a jerk? Or am I saying, Terry, you're getting up every day, you're doing your workouts, you're doing a really lovely job learning this new way of cooking. I've figured out a workaround for the organ meat because I don't really like it, so I'm going to take the capsules. So I'm praising myself for my efforts, or I'm condemning myself for my efforts. The physical activity, the spiritual connections, the family connections, all of those either create a web of helpful physiologies, helpful interactions, or they're loose links in your net of health. So I tell people, don't feel like you have to fix everything all at once.
Right.
Just start, and I prefer that people start with diet, but sometimes they can't do that. So we start with gratitude, or we start with sleep. And then as that new self-care routine gets firmly established, then you can begin to add another self-care routine that you can work on and more firmly establish. And so my presumption is that I will continue to refine and improve my self-care routine all of my life. And I assume that you'll be doing the same as well, Darin, that this is always a matter of you get your habits down, and then you can sort of reflect on what's the next step? Where else could I grow?
Absolutely. And I find for myself, I know when I don't sleep well, I feel it the next day. My
Yes.
strength, my stamina, my mental clarity. I have not been good in the past. I actually used to have a practice in Connecticut and a practice in California. So every 2 weeks, I was flying back and forth. And that change in time zones every 2 weeks really did a number on me. So I had to, I sold my practice in Connecticut, moved out to California full time so I could stay on one time zone. But I did not appreciate that sleep deprivation and how much it was really having a negative impact on my health and certainly my neurological system. In fact, there was a study that just came out. You probably saw it. It was maybe a week or two ago, showing that when we get into that deep sleep, that's when our brain literally detoxifies. And if we're missing out on that deep restorative sleep, it's when the brain's detoxifying, cells are repairing themselves. So all that good work that, again, built into our DNA happens when we're getting good sleep. So again, critically important to getting well.
I'm easily activated. All my whole life, I'm easily activated. I've big ambitions, lots of stuff I want to do. And so earlier in life, I thought it was fine to get by on 4 hours of sleep. Well, that's not fine. And now that I've learned to value sleeping much more effectively, and have done a lot better with my sleep hygiene, with getting outside for sunlight, with a meditation, mindfulness, my sleep quality and quantity has steadily improved.
Yeah, and I've actually, I got this thing called an Aura Ring. It's kind of like a Fitbit. I actually like it a lot. I think, these kind of devices, I used to be not so excited because I was worried about EMF production. This is actually a very low EMF device, and you can actually put it in a mode where basically is more or less off. It's still kind of recording data, but it's not constantly transmitting to another device. But I have found for the sleep part of it, it's really given me useful information about my quality of sleep. And I always kind of knew I wasn't a great sleeper. And then once I started using this and looking at the data, I'm like, wow, it's much worse than I thought. And again, over time, I've been able to see the progress by, trying to get to bed on an earlier time, be consistent in my pattern, trying to get away from like iPhone, iPad before you go to bed. So, sleep is very much a pattern. And there's a whole hormonal, neurotransmitter, biochemical aspect to sleep that you're trying to train your body to get in rhythm. And so as much as you can be consistent in your sleep pattern, stay away from stimulants before bedtime, do something soothing, like you said, meditation, relaxation, all of that.
Here's another one, Darin, an ice bath. So, and again, it may take some training to get up to this. First with a cool bath and a cold bath, then you can do cold water plus ice. That lowers your core temperature. It makes the latency period, so how long it takes for you to fall asleep, much shorter. The time to fall into deep sleep, shorter. The length of time in deep sleep, longer. And our ancestral, again, our mothers and fathers, thousands of generations ago, always had, because temperature drops during the night, and had a very cool, sleepy environment at night compared to the day.
Right.
That all those physiologic changes left them a much deeper, much more restful sleep.
Yeah, I have not been able to work my way up to the ice bath yet. Now, in all fairness, my bathtub is really shallow. I mean, I'm 6'2", so trying to get in a little shallow tub is challenging. But
yeah.
I know I see the pictures you post of that. I cringe a little bit, but no, it's a very naturopathic therapy, actually. Hydrotherapy has been used in naturopathic medicine for hundreds of years. And the benefit of using cold therapy is pretty well established. So yeah, if you can work your way up to that, it's just another inexpensive tool you can use to get better quality sleep.
So I like to do my morning self-care routine. I get up, I have a morning meditation, then I do my exercise routine, and I will do strength training, and I have a electrical stimulation device. So I'm doing exercise to electricity. Then I will make my morning tea, and I will go into my sauna, and I will have a sauna. And then I'll come out and shower with cold water, do that Scotch hose therapy. And then I get dressed and get onto my day. Now, some days I'll do a swim instead of strength training. but that whole routine is usually 2.5 hours.
Yeah.
And what I've discovered is now that I take the time to do that self-care, I am much more productive in the rest of my day. And I'm mature enough now that I'm able to retire from the parts of my job that aren't fun, I don't enjoy. And so I retired from the VA a couple years ago. I work at the university half-time doing the research that I care so passionately about. And then the rest of the time, I'm working on getting my seminar up and going and finding the best speakers like you to come talk and trying to be sure that we will have a really spectacular program for everyone.
Awesome. Well, I want to jump into next. I know you've got a new version of your book coming out soon.
Yes.
So I'd love to hear about. Oh, do we have a pre-copy?
You have it. I'm gonna grab it. Here we go.
Okay, so guys, the old one here. This
There we go.
was
You can see the two.
the old one, and here's the new one. Oh, let's see, we got pretty colors of veggies on it.
Yes.
So, can you tell us a little bit about some of the new stuff to coming out in the new book that we can expect to read?
I have more details on what we can do with the diet, how to personalize it. We talk about histamines, talk about oxalates, a little bit more on FODMAPs, a little more guidance on how to do the elimination diet and who would benefit from doing the elimination diet. And then, I'm still very fond of ketogenic eating, but I'm letting people know there are many ways to achieve ketogenic eating. There's the high fat with coconut milk, high fat using olive oil, or intermittent ketosis using time-restricted feeding, intermittent fasting, or periodic fasting. Yeah. And I explained that, I did ketogenic eating for several years, but then became much more impressed that the research talks about the benefit of metabolic switching, going from ketogenic eating to not ketogenic eating. Yeah. And going back and forth between the two, I think is physiologically superior. So what I do now is I have time-restricted feeding. I eat one meal a day. And then 1 week out of every month, I'm doing a pretty severe calorie restriction of 500 calories. Wow. So at the end of that week, I am pretty hungry. But that mild stress, that mild hormetic stress with the refeed after that, I get a little higher protein diet. Yeah. Stimulates my stem cells. Right. Stimulates my stem cells in my heart, in my liver, in my pancreas, in my blood vessels, and in my brain. So my kids are looking at me, they're going like, "Mom, you keep looking younger. Are you doing a Benjamin Button kind of thing here?" So my hair is getting grayer, so I'm sure I'm going to have normal aging showing up here soon, but I'm certainly aging at a much slower rate. And my, I did a little telomere test. And, since I have progressive MS, you think like my telomeres should show that I'm maybe a decade older than my chronologic age, but I turned out to be 12 years younger. So I think, thanks to that time-restricted feeding and that intermittent fasting, you can really slow down your aging, and you can youth-en probably a decade, maybe a decade and a half. So anyway, I'm talking about all of that. I also talked about neuro rehab and did a fair amount of conversation about the science of behavior change. And a little more detailed to help people grow their internal motivation so they could more successfully take on adapting, diet and lifestyle. Wonderful.
Well, I'm really looking forward to seeing the new version. And, on intermittent fasting, it's interesting. I did what they call fasting mimicking diet. There's a company that makes a kit. It's 5 days. I did it twice. And by the end of the week, you're pretty hungry. But, each time I would lose about 8 pounds. And even though I felt hungry, I felt more mentally clear. My gut actually felt quite well. So there's variations of it. I now do an intermittent fasting where basically I don't eat breakfast. My first meal is lunch and then dinner. And I found I was sort of borderline metabolic syndrome for many, many years leading up to that. And now it's like my blood sugar stable, my cholesterol dropped just from intermittent fasting and following, your protocol, your diet. So again, huge, huge changes outside of MS of just making me and everyone else out there healthier.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And when we look at this intermittent fasting, skipping breakfast and just doing lunch and supper is really pretty easy for a lot of folks. Just having a cup of black coffee or tea without any sugar or cream in it, that is generally very well tolerated, very easy for people to sustain. And people who follow me say, like, God, how can you eat enough in one meal a day to get all your calories in? Biologically, let me assure you, you'll be able to eat enough. Your hunger, your appetite will see to it that you eat enough calories to maintain your weight. So that won't be a problem.
Yeah. And if you're really, if you're interested in doing this and you're getting started, feel free to reach out to there's nutritionists. There's people, again, trained in the Wahls Protocol. If you go to her website, you can find a practitioner who understands and can walk you through it. So get help. It can be really daunting sometimes when you're making these diet changes. So I think the more support you get around it from professionals, family, friends, it just makes it easier to transition and you don't feel like you're kind of out there doing this all by yourself. So definitely feel free to reach out and get some help. So we have a few questions here. Let me read through these. Ellen, if you're still on, Ellen, thank you so much for joining us. She says, I didn't know a new version was coming out. She just bought your book. So, well, get two versions and then go give the old one to a friend.
Yeah.
Share it. Yeah. Kate asked a question about Byron White Detox 2. Kate, I'm going to answer you offline. It's not that's more related to Lyme disease. That's a specific protocol. So, Kate, I'll answer your question through the chat. Lorna, thank you for joining us. Laura says, I'm not a doctor and having no choice to be my own advocate. I know more of chronic illness than a lot of doctors I go to. They are not trained in chronic illnesses. It's a shame and makes it so difficult. I thank God for doctors like you, and both have helped us learn so much. Now that my brain fog is lifted, I can hopefully get to the next steps of healing. Great. Thank you for sharing that, Lorna. Let's see. Inbar here. Hi. When I'm in nutritional ketosis, I have a hard time falling asleep and staying asleep, even when I take magnesium. Do you have any tips?
Well, lots of things. Cold shower, cold bath, cold soak can be very, very helpful. Meditation, mindfulness, Epsom salts bath in the evening can also be very helpful. Lavender oil, chamomile oil. And then I would get some sort of sleep monitor. The Coil Ring could be very helpful. And use that to monitor your progress. And realize what we want to do is as many supportive things as we can to improve your sleep. And add one at a time. And over time, it will likely steadily improve.
Great. Thank you. Lorna also asked, she's been AIP for over 2 years and still limited. Introduction's not going well. How do I move forward? I conquered SIBO and Candida. Not sure why it's not healing.
So if you've been at this for 2 years and you're having some struggle, I would think you'd benefit a great deal from finding a nutritionist who's familiar with, say, the Wahls Protocol, or someone who can assess where you're at, perhaps with food sensitivity testing.
Right.
Figure out are there issues that are unique to you, and then guide you with a gradual reintroduction.
Yeah, I would second that. I think, if you've been on it for 2 years and you're finding you're still having reactions, is it a food sensitivity, food allergy? Is it related to histamine? So there's probably a bit more detective work that needs to go in to figure out for you what it is that's triggering those reactions. Lorna also asks, when will the book be available?
March 17th. If you keep going to Amazon and look for this cover, when you see this cover, you'll know that it's on the pre-order state.
Cover, so
we'll have both covers out there. So when you see the blue bar Then you'll know that at least when you're ordering it, you'll be getting the new book. It will be released on March 17th. It will probably be in a pre-order state beginning around March 1st.
Great. Yeah, you guys just keep checking back with Amazon on that. And Sarah asked, this is a great question. Thanks for joining us, Sarah. How to fast with low blood sugar?
Well, the reason most people get a low blood sugar is that their insulin is too high. And as the insulin drives the blood sugar in, your high blood sugar falls and it dips down to being too low. You have a lot of hunger. We tend to eat. Sugar spikes, insulin spikes. So we get into this hypoglycemic episode. Fasting improves sensitivity to insulin and gets rid of this spike between hyper and too low. Again, if you're struggling with this, find a nutrition professional who can assist you, and a primary care doc, naturopath, functional medicine doc who can assist you with monitoring your sugars in your diet as you make these changes.
Yeah, and Sarah, there is a way that you can check your blood sugar over a 3 or 4 hour period, where you can do a glucose and insulin tolerance test, where you can really monitor kind of how high or low your insulin's going and your glucose. And again, it just gives us other information about, potentially how to treat that. So you can definitely take a look at that. I think that was all the questions we had. I think the last thing before we wrap up today is you have a fantastic conference. I think this coming year is going to be, is this year 4 or 5?
This is year 6.
Oh my gosh, year 6. Wow.
Yeah, isn't that something? And of course, we have spectacular speakers such as yourself. And what we do is we have a beginner's track for people who've never been there, and an advanced track for people who come back year after year. I'd say about a third of the folks who come will have MS. Maybe another third will have some other autoimmune condition. And a third will have other health challenges that are not autoimmune in nature. We also have a bunch of health professionals that will come to get trained and then stay the additional day for the case-based learning. And then take the exam and get certified in the Wahls Protocol. We do a lot of information, but we also do a lot of skills development to grow your internal motivation, to understand your why you want to go on all of this. We sing, not necessarily in tune. We dance, not necessarily with the beat. We do a lot of movement. We do a lot of work to enhance your success with adopting and sustaining these health behavior changes. It's a remarkable group. About half of the folks will come back year after year after year and connect with old friends, make new friends. It's transformative. The first year we had I think 22 people. And now we're up over 300. And soon I'm going to be having to move to a larger facility, which will have some challenges because we're very picky about the food. And so we spend a lot of time training the chefs that we work with to have the food and the ingredients be what precisely we want our people to have.
Yeah, and I go to a lot of conferences. Therefore, I'm at a lot of hotels. I've had a lot of hotel food, and I was, I think the word is gobsmacked at how amazing the hotel was at preparing the food the way that you want. And they accommodated everything, and the food was amazing.
Yeah, and so we give breakfast, lunch, and supper. And so you get the meals. We have recipes so that you see that you're learning the types of meals that we teach people how to make at home. You have a chance to see that it's delicious, it's tasty, it's fun. So that's a spectacular couple days.
Yeah, and what are the dates this year?
I believe it is the 28th through August 1st.
Yeah, so July 28th through August 1st, and it's in Cedar Rapids, Iowa.
Cedar Rapids, correct? Iowa, yes.
So for those of you who are interested, I guess, check out Dr. Wahls' website. She's got all the conference information. And again, I appreciate it. Again, I went there as a professional, to speak, but again, I also went through the Wahls certification. But it was just a great place to connect with other people, who've had similar issues. Again, these are our people. These are the people that are, going through a similar issue. You can share a lot of information, and it was just a really nice collaboration of professionals, patients. So I would highly recommend it if you're able to go. I think you're going to get a lot out of it. You're going to come away with a lot of information. You're going to come out feeling very empowered to take stock of your own health, and you're going to make some cool new friends. So that's pretty awesome.
And you'll hear from spectacular people like Darin.
And you have no idea how well Dr. Wahls actually dances. It's pretty good. I got to tell you, Terry, it was so funny because, again, we had kind of met each other through Mindshare. We had these little meetings, and I had to laugh because the first full day of the seminar, I'm sitting there and you come like running in the room with all this energy. And again, if no one had ever told me that you had MS, I certainly wouldn't know it. Just watching you, the way you moved around and got on stage. And I think it's just a testament to everything you've done for your own health.
Yeah, we laugh, we sing, we dance, we hula hoop, and we're still on the third day, still going strong, just having a wonderful time with everyone there. It's a very exhilarating several days for all the attendees.
Yeah, it's absolutely wonderful. So I highly recommend it. Definitely check it out. I got one last question that came in here from Tina. Tina, thank you for joining us. I was diagnosed with MS over 10 years ago. SPMS the past few years with symptoms over 20 years. In addition, I have 4 other autoimmune conditions. In the past few years, I've seen a few functional medicine doctors who said Lyme is likely 20, 30 years. I've been gluten-free for 8 years, dairy-free for 2 years. Is there something in addition to the Wahls Protocol or the most important aspects I should do to combat Lyme? Do you want to comment on that? And then I'll say a few words.
If you're having such long duration, there's more rebuilding that's going to have to happen. So the recovery does take longer. And certainly, starting with diet, lifestyle, in our clinical trials, we've done just some very basic diet and lifestyle interventions. And we're able to achieve remarkable improvements in walking and in hand function, mental clarity, mood, that we could measure scientifically, and we've reported. So I want you to feel optimistic. I also want you to know that there's likely a lot more benefit. You can probably speed the healing by working with a practitioner who can evaluate you and personalize the recommendations and the type of intervention to match your microbiome needs, your hormone needs, and perhaps your toxin load exposures and whatever else we'd find based on talking with you and having an exam and perhaps additional investigation, if that's within your economic feasibility.
Yeah, again, my personal experience, again, as I was someone who had Lyme disease, I am of the opinion, I think Lyme is a trigger for MS. It's certainly not the only one. We do have research that so different microbes have been associated with MS, things like Epstein-Barr virus and human herpes 6 virus. So as part of my evaluation, if someone's been given a label of MS, I do look at these underlying infectious agents as potential triggers. Again, if we're going to really practice root cause medicine, this may be part of that thing that we need to deal with. So again, if you've never had a proper evaluation, and with Lyme, it's a little tricky because the testing isn't great. And if your exposure happened years ago, the testing gets worse the longer you get away from your initial exposure. But there are still avenues potentially to explore that might help pinpoint if that's part of what's going on. And Lyme is certainly associated with other autoimmune issues, arthritis and GI symptoms and so forth. So again, hopefully you've got a practitioner you can find in your area that will explore that with you. And if you find that something comes up, it gives you something else actionable to work on. But at the end of the day, a lot of things we've talked about this last hour about diet and lifestyle, that's applicable to anything. And I do the same thing with my Lyme patients as I do with my MS patients, because it's really about fixing the terrain. And in any kind of autoimmune condition, if you get the body healthier, it's able to withstand the effect of that condition much, much better. So I think that's all the questions. Dr. Wahls, I'm so appreciative of you joining me today. Thank you so much. I'm looking forward to the book coming out in a few weeks. And then, of course, I'll see you in July in Iowa. So guys, go to Amazon, pre-order it around March 1st. Keep looking for the revised and expanded blue bar at the top. It's going to be an amazing update to an already amazing book. So thank you so much, and have a great day.
Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.